Hey, how we doing? Welcome to Your Successful Retirement. I am Dennis O'Keefe, owner and CEO of Successful Money Strategies. Today, I want to deal with, there's been questions recently from various people in my life of, are we in a real estate bubble? And it's a good question. It's a really good question. Is real estate grossly overvalued? Are we looking at a crash? I want to just kind of delve into that, but it relates to a conversation I had with my wife last week, which never can go well, right? Yes, dear is the proper response. But we were talking about wisdom and age. And she made a statement that people, as you get older, you learn to deal with things, I think is the way she put it. And you mature was the way she put it, I believe. You just mature and you're able to handle stuff. And I disagreed. And my opinion is that wisdom comes from experiencing things multiple times and being able to see the pattern. Patterns are important. My son, William, is like Mr. Pattern. When he was 4, there was some book that my wife was reading him on patterns. And he was like Mr. Pattern at the time, mom, this is an ABAB pattern. Mom, this is ABC. Mom, this is ABC pattern. He would just find them. And today he's 17 and he can see patterns so well in life because life is all about patterns. His interactions are about patterns. It's seeing not what actually looks like is going on, but backing up a level. So patterns are important. And experiencing those patterns more than once gives you a different perspective because we like to think we mature. We don't. Based on my years of anecdotal experience, I would say pretty much everybody emotionally is anywhere from 8 to 15 years old, that we stop maturing emotionally at that point, but we handle things better as we get older because of experience. So think of it this way. Have you ever been to a haunted house? I hate them. I remember I was probably 4 or 5 and it seemed cool. Let's go to the fun house at the county fair, the Cuyahoga County, I think is what we were in. We lived near Cleveland. County fair with my grandmother and my grandfather and my brother. Off we go. I freaked out. I did not get 5 steps into that place. Get me out of here. I was not a fan of all of that. So think of if you were going through as an adult, there are the jump scares and the creepy things and all of that. And it's got this visceral response, right? Let me ask you, what if you went and you left and you went right back into the haunted house? You know where all the jump scares are. You know all the creepy things. You know the disturbing displays that they're going to have. All of a sudden your reaction is much different, isn't it? It's completely different. And that's what experience does, is if we're able to experience things, then we're all set. So the second part of my point with wisdom is the older you get, the more time compresses. Now, if you were to say to me, and you say to anybody, 56, to a mid 50-year-old, what was 20 years ago? 1985. No, that was 40 years ago. And I think about when I was in my elementary school years and talking with my grandfather, who took me to the haunted house at the carnival, or the county fair rather. He was in World War II, and that was 30 years prior. And his perspective on that, I mean, World War II seems like forever ago. My dad was born right before World War II. And that just seems like a million years ago. And it wasn't. The older you get, the more that time compresses and the more you're able to see different patterns creep up. Is you're learning not just from things from recent memory, like the haunted house, but you see the same pattern show up again and again in a relationship or in a business setting. You go, oh, that's not a big deal. So I want to talk about patterns as they relate to real estate. And I'm going to start in about 1985, 20 years ago, or 40 years ago is what it really is. And if you're younger than 50, you don't remember all of this. We didn't have iPads. We didn't have iPhones. We didn't have YouTube. We didn't have the internet. And there were these infomercials all the time because there were way too many cable channels and way too much dead air. So there were a bajillion of infomercials. You had the Amazing Discoveries guy with the glasses and the Bill Cosby like wacky sweater all the time, and he was hawking this and that. My favorites were, there were these fake auction infomercials. They were a half an hour long. Some guy would get there and there'd be people in the quote unquote audience, sometimes a few, sometimes many. And he'd be getting, I've got this thing and let's bid on it. And they'd bid it up to some ridiculous number. And he'd go, wait, I need to stop the whole auction. And there was like 3 or 4 of them that did this exact same model. They're going to stop the whole auction and we're going to talk about the product. And then I'm going to say, it's not for $100. It's not 50, not 40 or 30. For every hand that goes up, for every one that calls in, $19.95. And I still remember they would all use the same formula. I loved those things. I watched them. There was the guy, that was definitely New York City and all the Italian guys pointing, hey, oh, hey, oh. And there was another guy that only had one arm that wore like a bush coat and like an Australian hat. Wacky stuff, because there was nothing else to do. It was go read a book, watch whatever else was on TV, which there wasn't much, or watch these infomercials, and the infomercials were popular. But also during that time, there were multiple infomercials on how to buy real estate. I'm 16 years old. I am fascinated by this. I still am fascinated by it today, which is why we're talking about it, is I track this just as a hobby. Is real estate doesn't necessarily affect how we do business with our clients, but it's something I focus on because it's a hobby. It's a fascination of mine. And there were multiple no money down, low money down. This is how you do it. You can buy real estate and you can turn it around right away. You can be, and the overriding scam back then was you would find somebody that was a distressed property owner, not a distressed property owner. The owner was distressed, not the property. They were behind the mortgage, whatever, but they had a massive amount of, or a reasonable amount of equity in the home. And back in the 80s, a lot more mortgages were what's called assumable. So you could just take over the mortgage. So you would take over the mortgage for them. You would buy the property from them for like $8 and we'll take over the mortgage. And they were so thankful. And then you would go out immediately and mortgage the thing to the hilt and take the cash out and then go do something else with the cash and then rent out that house. That was their big plan back then, but it was massive. There was a lot of talk. There was a lot of buzz around real estate. And I remember at the time, it was probably my grandmother, talking about real estate. Well, what you do is you just buy a 2-family and you rent out upstairs and that pays your mortgage. And even at like 16, that math didn't ring true to me. I'm like, well, that means the rents are way too high and people would build more houses and the price of the houses would adjust. And it didn't quite make sense to me. And it doesn't. It is rare, even in the best of times, like right after our real estate crash, to be able to buy a piece of property, live on one side, buy a two family property, live in one unit, rent the other, and be able to pay the whole mortgage. It's difficult, but that was the mindset back then. And just about that time, I was trying to remember last night if it was 85 or 86. My parents, I want to say it was December of 86, but it's got to be 85 just because of how old I was. My folks bought a house in Falmouth, Massachusetts, that my children affectionately known as the pool house, because my parents put a pool in later on for their grandkids, which I thought was awesome. And they bought that house and it must have been December of 1985. And my gosh, they caught the absolute top of that market because everybody was buying real estate. Everybody was buying real estate. It was bonkers. And they were buying in a vacation area. If you think about Cape Cod in general back then, very different. If you know Cape Cod today, especially the western half of what's called the Lower Cape, Upper Cape, I forget. I think that's the Lower Cape. It's pretty much a year-round place. But in the 80s, no, it wasn't. It was lock that place up. There were some people that still lived there, but there was very few services. There was not many restaurants open. Of course, not many people went out to eat back then as they are today. A lot of stores would close. Things were very seasonal, where they're not so much today. So they bought this place. They thought they got a fair price. They probably paid $130,000 in 1985. And their intention was they were buying it then. And then at some point in the next 10 or 12 years, they would retire to that house, which is exactly what they did. And then they built the pool, and my kids got to play in the pool. That house, they caught the top of the market. They caught the absolute top of the market. They couldn't have paid more for that house. And that house was great. It was an awesome house. It was, again, those memories I have of being there with my kids and spending time and then going on the beach in the afternoon and things like that is priceless. But that house wasn't worth what they paid for it for over a decade. It was over a decade before it came back. And that's just shocking. And it was just, I cannot explain, if you didn't go through it, the frenzy of buying property. When I started in this business in 1991, I was dealing with a number of new clients that worked for NYNEX Yellow Page. Remember the Yellow Pages? They were Yellow Page salespeople, which was a union job, which I think is hysterical. So they were guaranteed an income that was well above. It was probably double what your average lineman was making or operator was making, for sure, to do half the work. And if you screwed it all up and really didn't work very hard, you got paid anyways because it was a union job. So at some point in the late 80s, all of these people, like every single one of them, it seemed, decided that the best thing they could do with their excess money, because they were making way too much money, was to buy a condo and rent it out. Oh gosh. Okay. And here's the rub. He's going back to my grandmother and that, buy the 2-family and you're all set. They did not have positive cash flow in that condo day one. They would buy the condo for $50,000, and the rent that they could charge was not sufficient to cover the mortgage and the condo fee and the taxes and the insurance. It was not covering it. They were losing money from the beginning. But their thought was, we'll buy these. They'll appreciate in value. I want you to remember that. They'll appreciate in value, and later on, we will sell them. And they all did it. And so did a whole bunch of other people. If you remember the late 80s, the mid 80s was this condo craze. Everybody had to buy a condominium because that's the next greatest thing. Why? Because it is. And they all go up in value. And this is how we do it. And I spent probably from 1991 to 1997 extricating people from these bad deals. And what that meant a lot of times was paying down a mortgage. So they would buy it for, let's say, $50,000. They would put $10,000 down. They would borrow $40,000, and the place was worth $25,000. Now what do? Do you just bite the bullet and pay the $15,000, or do you lose whatever it was, $600 a month? I forget the exact numbers of what they were losing, but they were losing big money every single month because it wasn't worth what they thought it was, because they were okay losing the money because they were counting on that appreciation as what they were going to get on the back end. And that's dangerous. So I watched that pattern happen, and I had to deal with some difficult conversations with clients of biting that bullet. And sometimes I was the messenger and I got shot, and it is what it is. But I saw that pattern. And let's go to 20 years later, the mid 2000s. Most people listening to this podcast probably remember 2008, 2009, real estate crash. People want to blame no income verification mortgages. Definitely a problem. They want to blame all sorts of government entities and banks and things like that for lending the money. No question. I saw the same pattern again. And I'll give you one story. I have been in online discussion groups for close to 30 years. It's something that I enjoy having conversations. I enjoy honing my arguments. it makes me a good writer from doing this. I spent a couple of hours a week on it, just having discussions. There was this one woman on this one discussion group, and her husband was an Army veteran, and she touted that all the time. She was very good at tooting her own horn all the time. And some people followed her because of that. Like, oh yeah, she's great because that's what, she's awesome because she tells us she's awesome. That's not a good reason. And I stopped discussing things on this discussion group because of that, because it was a bunch of people just following. Anyways, she had moved in the early 2000s to Las Vegas because of a job that her husband had taken post-military. And he was like real military, like 20 years plus, combat, all of that. He was the real deal. And they bought this house, and then they bought another one a couple of years later. And she's relaying this online and talking about, we're buying this other place because, our house we bought 2 years ago and it's worth 60% more than what we paid. And that's just what it is. And very gently, I said, you want to be careful because that doesn't last forever. That what goes up that fast must come down. She explained in public for every other person on that discussion group to see what an idiot I was, that I was a complete and utter moron, that you don't understand that this is the new economy. I love that one. This is the new economy. And Las Vegas is hot and it's going and it's going to double and it's going to double again because it's hot. You don't understand. It's hot. Okay. And there were a lot of places like that. Phoenix was, in Florida for sure at the same time. But Las Vegas seemed like the lightning rod. You may remember if you listened to the radio, especially talk radio or news radio back in the early 2000s. I listened to WBZ because at the time, no GPS, no live traffic at all. You're driving around in the greater metro Boston area. You're going to have to listen to WBZ because you need the traffic report. Traffic on the threes. I think traffic was every other 3, 13, 23, 33, all of that. Weather on the ones, whatever it was. But yeah, you need that traffic report every 10 minutes because you don't know what's going to happen. And there was this commercial for this high-rise condo complex in Las Vegas, downtown, right in the middle of all of it. And their spokesperson was Tanya Roberts. Now, Tanya Roberts got her big break in this movie Beastmaster, which was awful back in 83, 84. She did a lot of, what's the word I want? Colorful B movies. I'll say it that way. She was also, the redhead's mom on that 70s show. She was ditzy. She has this raspy voice, and she hawked this place like crazy on these commercials. These commercials were like a minute long, you're going to come here and it's this and it's that. We're going to have this and high roller baby and all this other stuff. And I'm like, who the heck is buying a condo to go 3 times a year to Vegas? Oh, everybody that's buying one of these 250 condos thinks they're going to rent it out. Oh, no. Oh, no. No. And you saw the same thing happen in Florida, was the building craze in the early to mid 80s. And the building craze in Florida didn't stop until probably 2009. There were still builders building stuff because it's like, well, it's already half done. Better complete it. Maybe I can sell it. And they couldn't because it was all about, we're going to build it. We're going to charge you X. And it's going to be a terrible deal for you. But in a few years, that appreciation is going to go somewhere and you're going to be filthy rich. So same pattern is that the appreciation is required in order for you to make money, that everything else is a disaster. So let's fast forward to today. I had 2 situations in the last month or so with clients that happen to live in vacation areas. And what they found was that they owned property that was rental. And it was a situation, I'll pick on one specifically in this geographic area. And they bought bought 2 separate properties on top of the house they live in now a number of years ago. And now they're worth a ridiculous amount of money. One of them is worth $2 million, which I can't conceive of a vacation house being worth $2 million. And it's not like it's some palatial place. It's a house. It's near the beach in a hot area. So it's worth $2 million. And we're running the numbers, and their yield on what's called cost. So yield on cost, how much money are they making versus what it cost them to buy it all of those years ago, isn't terrible. They're earning somewhere around $50,000 in rent per year because it's seasonal. It's very seasonal. Season's tight. It costs a lot per week, but the season is tight. They make $50,000 to $60,000 a year on that. They yield on cost, what they paid for it 15, 18 years ago, is actually reasonable. Their yield on what it's worth today, they're making $50,000 gross. They're paying a mortgage. They still have a mortgage on it because they have to keep upkeep. They have to replace roofs and things like that. It's near the water. It's near salt water, which means there's more wear and tear on the property. It's being used hard for 10 weeks or so a year. The yield on what the current value is nothing. They're making maybe $25,000 a year on this piece of property that's worth $2 million. I don't know about you, but that doesn't sound like a good deal. That's like 1%ish. That's it. What are they counting on? They're counting on the appreciation. And they have seen in the last 10 or 15 years, this property appreciate super significantly. And I'm seeing this over and over and over and over again. And I don't know if this is like the canary in the coal mine. Is this problem I saw 40 years ago and the problem I saw 20 years or almost 20 years, 18 years ago, is this an every 20-year pattern that, oh yeah, people just get crazy and they focus solely on the appreciation, and then all of a sudden everything falls apart. It's one of the dominoes that has to fall in order for everything to crash in the real estate market. I don't know. It does have me concerned, or at least watching carefully of what's going on in real estate, because everything we do is so tied to it. We're in a strange real estate market to begin with. Is right around when COVID hit, which was 5 years ago, if you can believe it, 5 years ago, this time of year, we were all like sequestered in our houses and wiping down our groceries with wet wipes. As you remember, wiping down your groceries with wet wipes, that was stupid. We were morons. And people in charge were morons. The government, the scientists, the corporations, they were also morons. They were probably more morons than we were because they knew better and they still didn't tell us. But I digress. All of a sudden, real estate started slowing down. There was not as much inventory. And that's coming through today, that the inventory, especially on the coasts, Midwest, a little bit different, but on the coasts, inventory is still tight. And even though interest rates have risen significantly since 2000 and significant since 2022, let's say, you're still dealing with, because of that low inventory, prices are remaining high. I talked with a real estate agent friend of mine about 6 or 8 months ago. And I said, look, I just want to get an idea. What's it like out there? I said, are you seeing, any slowdown or weakness? She said, Dennis, I'll tell you. And this is a woman in my town, Taunton, Massachusetts, old mill town. It's just there at this point, more a bedroom community than anything. She said, if your house is in top-notch shape, it'll go, and it'll go quickly. And if it's not, it's going to sit, because people want to be able to move. They want move-in ready, and you need to make sure that things are move-in ready. And as long as they're move-in ready, prices are still increasing. That was 6 to 8 months ago. Again, this is what I watch. I watch in my local areas as kind of that bellwether trend of the Northeast in general. I'm starting to see real estate agents post on the local Facebook groups, price adjustment, price adjustment, price adjustment. We may have hit the top finally. We may have found the top of this market that at 6.5% or 7% 30-year mortgages, people are unwilling to pay more than what they're paying right now. Will that mean a massive crash? I don't know. But if you're looking at a real estate transaction, buying, selling, moving sideways, whatever, it's important for you to know this. This is one of those things that I want to make sure that people are aware of so they can make good decisions, that you're not going to be in trouble. It might be better, for a number of years, it was a situation. So say probably from maybe 2015 through last year, maybe even right now, the last thing you wanted to do if you were moving was to have that money out of the real estate market for any length of time. So if you were selling your house and moving to a new one, you wanted to wait you wanted that distance between the two of those numbers to be as close as possible. You didn't want to sell something, wait 2 years, and then buy your next house, because the appreciation in the real estate market was likely going to be higher than what you could get in any sort of reasonably safe investment at that time. I'm not so sure right now. I'm not so sure that if you're looking to move to, let's say, a different geographic location in 2 years, that it might not be a better idea today to say, maybe we sell and capitalize on that and put the money in a CD making 4%, 3.5%, whatever it is, 5%, whatever CDs are paying at this point, and hold off. So it creates a little bit more uncertainty in your planning. So I want you to be aware of that. But yeah, it could have impacts on the overall economy. It definitely, the real estate crash in the 80s somewhat impacted the economy, I would say. I'd say somewhat because, the crash of 87, stock market crash of 87 was right after it. You could say, well, one was because of the other. Not really. And a lot of the financial problems we had in the 80s was because of the savings and loan crisis, the S&L crisis, if you remember all of that. Probably not, unless you're over probably 60 or 65. And even then it wasn't that. It's so long ago. It's such a footnote to history, but it was massive. Is just like in 2008, 2009, that you had banks that had to get bailed out by the government. Same thing happened back in the late 80s, early 90s, except the government let the banks go out of business. They brought FDIC in to just restructure these banks and sell them off after they went out of business. And they found that was probably a bad idea. It exacerbated the problem. But that was probably the bigger issue financially. And I'm not sure what that looks like this time is what happens if people start defaulting on mortgages and things like that. It could be interesting, but, yeah, that's what I have for you today. That's really it. It was more of a cerebral exercise. I don't have big calls to action today. It was more, oh, wow, this could be happening again. And I just want to keep you informed so that you're aware of things. So with that, thanks for listening today. Stay safe out there.
Thank you for listening to Your Successful Retirement with your host, Dennis O'Keefe. Please click the follow button to be notified when new episodes become available. You can find information for Dennis, our guests, or resources mentioned in today's episode in the show notes.